Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Limits. This is Timothy MK. Today, our hosts are going to discuss the latest article I have written called 52 Laps Around the Sun. This article and many more can be found on the Beyond Limits publication site at news.timothymk.com.
Okay, so you sent over some really powerful material for us to look at today.
Yeah, quite a collection.
We're focusing on the LGBTQ plus community's journey, maybe the last 50 years or so, especially how it intersects with the conservative Christian church.
Right. We've got Timothy MK's personal story and 52 Laps Around the Sun, pieces from Beyond Limits, the study guide, and that timeline. It all connects.
And our goal here really is to try and understand it all. The steps forward, the pain, the things that are still really complicated.
Looking at those key moments, those perspectives in the sources.
Yeah, and some of it is, well, pretty surprising. Like you see the APA making a move, but then bam, immediate pushback legally.
And the silence around some early tragedies is stark. Plus the personal costs for people trying to reconcile faith and who they are. It's heavy stuff.
Let's start back in 1973. Seems like a pivotal year.
It really was, but full of contradictions.
Yeah.
You have the American Psychiatric Association removing homosexuality.
A huge step for destigmatization, right. Taking it out of the illness category.
Exactly. A major shift, scientifically at least. But almost in the same breath, Maryland becomes the first state to actually ban same-sex marriage.
Wow. So progress here, slam door there, shows it wasn't a straight line at all.
Not even close. It shows how, a medical or scientific shift doesn't automatically change hearts and minds or laws. Prejudice runs deep.
And yet, that same year, you also see the beginnings of organized community. The National Gay Task Force starts up.
And PFLA holds its first meeting. Parents, families starting to offer public support. That's significant, too.
But then June 24th, 1973, the upstairs lounge arson in New Orleans.
Just horrific. 32 people killed, many from the Metropolitan Community Church, which was a welcoming space.
It's hard to grasp that level of hate, targeting people in a place they felt safe. And the reaction afterward.
That's almost as shocking, isn't it? The lack of outcry, the silence from officials, even mockery in some reports.
What was behind that? Just intense homophobia. Religious condemnation.
Probably a mix of it all. It just laid bare how incredibly vulnerable the community was and how little acceptance or even basic empathy existed in the mainstream, including many churches.
This brings us to the church's response, which is a major theme in 52 Laps Around the Sun. Timothy MK talks about growing up conservative Christian.
Yeah, the message was clear. Faith and being gay.
Mm-hmm.
Incompatible. It was seen as sin, something broken that needed fixing.
And that led to churches actually promoting things like conversion therapy.
Oh, definitely. Through prayer, counseling, sometimes those ex-gay camps you hear about, different forms, same goal. Change the person's orientation. Based on this idea, it's a choice or disorder.
The damage from that must have been immense.
Lasting scars. Shame, self-hatred. We'll probably talk more about that later.
And then late 70s, early 80s, you see the rise of the religious right.
Right, and they really weaponized family values as a way to push back against LGBTQ plus rights. It became a very organized political force.
Framing it as an attack on tradition.
A very effective narrative, politically. It shaped discourse for decades. Now, the sources mentioned some welcoming congregations were starting to appear.
But they were the minority.
Very much so. The dominant message from conservative Christianity was still rejection. So for many LGBTQ plus people, the church itself became a source of trauma, not comfort.
Then the 80s arrive, and with them, the AIDS epidemic.
Devastating. Absolutely devastating for the gay community especially.
And the initial reaction from government was indifference.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Slow, inadequate, and cruelly, many churches framed AIDS as like divine punishment, just piled on the suffering and stigma.
Awful. But that crisis also lit a fire under activism, didn't it?
It absolutely did. Groups like ACTUP, the AIDS Action Council, they formed out of necessity, demanding action, research, compassion. They were loud and visible.
It shows how communities fight back when they're ignored or attacked.
Powerful example of collective action against neglect and prejudice. It really changed the game for advocacy.
But even into the 90s, conversion therapy was still happening.
Yes. Sometimes under different names, maybe less overt, but still pushing that same harmful message of shame.
And churches were actively fighting against things like anti-discrimination laws.
And marriage equality, yes.
Yeah.
Actively lobbying against them. Imagine being an LGBTQ plus Christian then.
Yeah.
Forced to choose between your faith community and yourself.
That's an impossible position. Creates such deep wounds.
Absolutely. Then, October 1998, Matthew Shepard.
His murder was just brutal, targeted specifically for being gay.
And it hit a nerve nationally, didn't it? The sheer violence of it. It forced a kind of reckoning, made people confront the real-world cost of that hate.
The vigils, the protests, they were everywhere.
It felt like a moment where maybe the broader society was starting to see the humanity that had been denied.
And his parents, Judy and Dennis Shepard, incredible.
Turning that unimaginable grief into action, fighting for hate crime laws.
Which eventually led to the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act in 2009.
A major legal step, finally acknowledging hate-motivated violence in federal law. But it took over a decade after his death.
And even after Matthew's murder, many churches stayed silent. Or worse.
Yeah, still condemnation from many corners, not repentance or a real shift in stance. It's sobering.
Fast forward to June 12th, 2016, Pulse nightclub, Orlando.
Another horrific attack. 49 people killed, 53 injured, and specifically targeting Latin night at a gay club.
A violation of a safe space again.
Yes. And the response, the global solidarity, blood donations, vigils, it showed how much some things had changed since the upstairs lounge.
But for many, there was still that disconnect with some religious institutions, right?
Definitely. Tepid condolences or silence, while still upholding teachings that reject LGBTQ plus people. That adds another layer of pain.
And it's important to stress that conversion therapy, it hasn't gone away.
No, sadly not. It persists, especially in conservative religious circles, despite overwhelming evidence that it's harmful and ineffective.
The stories from survivors, years of shame, isolation.
Deep psychological harm. And the legal situation is still a mess. Banned in some places, but allowed in others, often defended under religious freedom.
So the fight continues even on that front.
And the fact that many churches haven't fully, unequivocally renounced it speaks volumes about where they still stand on acceptance.
Okay, so the 21st century. There have been significant steps forward, legally and socially.
Absolutely. Don't ask, don't tell, repealed. DOMA struck down.
Remind us quickly, what was DOMA?
The Defense of Marriage Act.
Yeah.
It basically said at the federal level, marriage was only man-woman, and let states ignore same-sex marriages from other states.
So striking it down in 2013 was big, federal recognition.
Huge. Access to federal benefits, all of that. And then, of course, 2015, nationwide marriage equality. The Obama administration also made LGBTQ plus rights a focus.
Real progress, but...
But there's always a but, isn't there? Intense backlash, new state laws, court challenges, trying to chip away at those protections.
Things targeting bathroom access, healthcare for trans people, participation in sports.
Exactly. The fight for transgender rights is particularly fierce right now, and hate crimes haven't stopped. Progress seems to always provoke resistance.
So where does that leave the church today, particularly conservative denominations?
Well, based on the sources, many still bar LGBTQ plus individuals from leadership roles, won't perform or bless same-sex marriages, and either support or tolerate conversion therapy practices.
Creating that deep divide you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, a stark contrast to the affirming congregations that do exist, but are still often in the minority overall.
And the personal cost for LGBTQ plus Christians caught in the middle.
It's immense. That statistic is telling nearly 2/3 raised Christian have left the church. They feel forced out by that conflict between faith and identity.
Which brings us back to Timothy MK's personal story woven through these sources.
Right, coming out publicly at 43 in 2017, losing his marriage, friends, his church community, a huge personal upheaval.
And his struggle with alcoholism, then finding sobriety during the pandemic. That seems like a crucial period.
It sounds like it was. A time of deep reflection that led him to really question the church teachings he'd grown up with about homosexuality.
Which ultimately led to his platform Beyond Limits, challenging those views.
Yeah, his journey, the loss, the struggle, the questioning, the eventual pushback, it really personalizes the broader history we've been discussing. It shows the real human impact.
Looking back over these 5 decades, from the APA decision, through the tragedies, the activism, the legal battles, the ongoing struggles, you really see this tension.
Yeah, the slow, often resistant movement within much of the conservative church compared to broader societal shifts sometimes, and the deep personal cost for individuals.
We have to remember the grief. Matthew Shepard, Pulse, Upstairs Lounge, the AIDS crisis, so many lives lost. But also acknowledge the strength of those who survived and fought back.
Absolutely. It's complex, and people listening will have their own perspectives, of course.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given this history, these stories, What would true reconciliation actually look like? What fundamental shifts might need to happen within faith communities for that?
Does it require maybe a radical level of empathy, a willingness to really listen, understand, and maybe reevaluate beliefs that have been held for a very long time? Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us for Beyond Limits today and this review of the article 52 Laps Around the Sun. I hope that it was impactful and you enjoyed it. Please head over to news.timothymk.com for more content like this and subscribe. Thank you.